Welcome to Eastlake Online. This is a condensed version of what we do live every Sunday at the Uptown Theater. We know it's not always possible or even preferred to be a part of what we do in person, so that's why we made this. Thanks for checking it out. In just a minute, someone is going to give a short talk that hopefully resonates with you and helps you interpret what it might mean to follow in the way of Jesus, because that's what this community is all about. Figuring out what it might look like to live life the way that Jesus did, except in our current context with like cell phones and self-driving cars and stuff. We're a community where everyone is invited, included, and involved no matter what. And though our physical location is in the budding metropolis of the Tri-Cities, wherever you're watching this from, we want to invite you to bring a bit of heaven into your part of the world. Thanks for catching us on the interwebs. If you're looking for more content, follow us on social media or keep checking our website for all kinds of resources that we hope are helpful. And now, this.
Woo! I think we're good. Check. All right. Welcome to Eastlake, and welcome to those of you who are online at home adjusting your volume right now, trying to figure out what's going on. We are glad that you're here. My name is Brandon, the teaching pastor. Sort of a Christian home where you could or couldn't say some things, or maybe just even a non-religious home, but like, curse words were like, hey, we can be more, you can use your vocabulary more than that. There are some things that you still feel a little bit out of bounds even about saying, even as an adult where there's nobody like wash your mouth out with soap. You could say whatever you wanted to, and you still kind of feel uncomfortable doing it. And I totally get that. The point of this series is not shock value. Like, it's not even that shocking of a value to be like, oh, we're doing a series called OMG. The point of it is we are going to be talking about idolatry, and idolatry doesn't feel like all that relevant of a topic. And there's a lowercase g in this sort of this title of this series for the reason that when you read your Bible at home, regardless of your translation, most likely when you come across the word God in it, it is either capitalized, which is to insinuate the God of the Bible, the Yahweh God of Israel, and the God that you probably have in mind when you think of the term God, versus all of the other gods that are referred to in the Bible, the ones that we're not supposed to have prayed to, we're not supposed to have idols to, or the gods of the Roman culture or the Greek culture or the ancient culture surrounding Israel of those times. The problem is that there was no capitalization in the Hebrew language, the original Hebrew language. So they'd be reading. It's very hard to kind of distinguish which one is he talking about. And so they came along at some point and said, we're going to do it in this way to kind of help illustrate what this is going on. So that helps make sense of some things. Side note, there's no punctuation marks in the Hebrew language as well. So there's no periods, there's no commas, there's no exclamation points to be like, that's exciting. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. So imagine how difficult it would have been to have read just verse upon verse upon verse and the breakdowns of all of that. Luckily for us, we live in a day and age, chapters, verses, breakdowns, punctuation marks, capitalization help us to be able to understand some of that. This isn't a series on biblical knowledge or literacy or anything like that. I just wanted to point some of those sort of things out for you because we're going to be talking about idolatry. And again, idolatry feels like an irrelevant topic. The last time you probably thought about idols was the last time you went and saw like a little Buddha statue at the Chinese food restaurant that you ordered from, that you're like, that's there, but that's not really me. I don't have any of those things at my house, I promise. And so we wanted to kind of make you rethink it in this sort of way. There is a term that shows up that is translated as idolatry or idol worship. or occasionally, what's another one that it does? The worship of other gods, whatever. The rabbinic term of this in the Hebrew is avodah sarah. Avodah sarah, and it means all of these things at once, but when you take it in its actual literal translation, it just simply means strange worship. Strange worship. So I titled today's talk, Strange Worship, because I don't want you to kind of go, oh, it's on idolatry, I don't really do the idol thing. It's strange worship because for them, when they came at things in life with we believe in the one God who called us out of Egypt and gave us this new promised land, and it's very specific who he is, for them, building your life on anything other than that, other than the most obvious, this is our God who called us out, would have been to them strange. They would say it's weird. It would be strange to position something in your life as more important than that. And not only that, it was also in the form of a verb, a strange way of worshiping as well. The way that people would worship would be strange. And that's true for us. Like, we've seen some things. We've seen people from other cultures worship their gods in unique ways, and we'd be like, that's kind of a bit strange from what I'm used to. I'm used to showing up on Sundays. I'm used to a Bible. I'm used to something, and something can be so different. But it also refers to this idea that it's strange for us that people prioritize things in life, that they put so much weight into into something, and the things that people do to pattern their lifestyles around certain hobbies or certain people or certain amounts of money or certain body image stuff or whatever, we see it in how much time they spend, how much money they spend, how much attention. It can sometimes feel strange to us. There is a sense of normalcy and everything else. And then there's articles written sometimes about people who go and do just strange things. We're like, that's a strange way to sort of live. That doesn't fit my category of normal. And so this idea of strange worship and this idea of strange idolatry is going to be the focus of the next couple of weeks. The series is going to focus on the empty promises, the unfulfilled empty promises of money, sex, power, achievement, fame, and everything else that we're conditioned to think of as the good life. Anything that has been kind of conditioned in our way of saying this is worth living for, this is worth investing in, this is worth kind of putting strength and value and attention and focus into. And it's an idol. These are all idols that we all face, and ultimately identify, hopefully, at the end of this thing, the only hope that truly matters, the one hope that truly matters. So, it is going to be about idolatry, but probably not in the way that you think of it, and hopefully in a way that feels a little bit more relevant and hands-on with some handles on it. So, before we get into that, I want to talk about a story that happened 7 years ago, 2014, about this time. I think it was just a couple of weeks ago, it was the 7-year anniversary of it, but we were just getting ready to move into this building. I was in the lobby on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I don't even remember what day of the week it was, painting on a ladder with Larry Oliveira helping us get the lobby ready to kind of get things going to be able to move in here in September of 2014. When my phone buzzed in my pocket and I pulled it out, and I looked, and I saw that Robin Williams was trending on Twitter, and like alerts were going off all over the place. And that's never a good sign, usually. And I saw a message saying that Robin Williams has passed away, and going, oh my goodness, and hoping, like we all do when some of these things happen, that this is just one of those like fake news sort of ththings that, like, you know, every once in a while it's like, I think Tom Hanks has died like 20 times on Twitter. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not out of bounds. And you kind of hope that. Like, we all have this like heritage or memory of Robin Williams. I don't know if it was Mrs. Doubtfire for you or Good Morning Vietnam or whatever, but he was a very likable guy, and everybody sort of knew who he was if you weren't a fan of him at all. But and he had a golf bit, and I just remember that it just slayed. It was so good. He was so funny and so likable. So you hope, in that moment you go, I hope this isn't true, I hope this isn't true. And then more reputable sources came out and be like, this is true, he's taken his own life. And you hear the backstories that came out a few weeks after that about dealing with depression and Parkinson's and mental health stuff. And it's just a sad, brutal sort of thing. And like we do, our nation goes through we mourn publicly now. Social media has given us this platform to sort of mourn in a public manner and be like, well, I remember this about him, or I really like this, or whatever. And one of those tributes was a moving tribute by a fellow comic named Norm Macdonald. He used to be an SNL guy, and he came on to Twitter and this was back when Twitter had like 140K character limit, so it's broken down a little bit more. It would have been less so now. Created this thread as a tribute to Robin Williams that I want to walk us through because it's both funny and poignant at the same time. So here's what he says. It was my first stand-up appearance on Letterman, and I had to follow the funniest man in the world, hashtag rest in peace, Robin Williams. I was a punk kid from rural Ontario, and I was in my dressing room, terrified, rest in peace, Robin Williams. I was on the phone to a friend back home when the funniest man in the world ambled by, rest in peace, Robin Williams. There was no one else on the floor. In shock, I told my friend who just walked by, only the funniest man in the world, rest in peace, Robin Williams. I guess he heard me say his name because in an instant he was at my side, rest in peace, Robin Williams. He was a Jewish tailor taking my measurements. He went down on his knees, asked which way I dressed, rest in peace, Robin Williams. I told my friend on the phone that the funniest man in the world was on his knees before me measuring my inseam, rest in peace, Robin Williams. You can just see him like committing to this bit, can't you? My friend didn't believe me, so I said, could you talk to my friend, sir? Rest in peace, Robin Williams. The funniest man in the world took the phone and for 10 minutes took my friend's Chinese food order, which is so great. Rest in peace, Robin Williams. I laughed, and it was like I was in a dream because nobody else was there. No one. Just committed to this bit, even with no big audience in play. Rest in peace, Robin Williams. The place was out of Mushu pork, and there was nothing he could do about it. Rest in peace, Robin Williams. That's my favorite one. He angrily hung up on my friend, and I was about to thank him when he said I hadn't even tried the jacket on. Rest in peace, Robin Williams. Then the funniest man on earth dressed me, a complete stranger, and I remember he ended with a Windsor knot. Rest in peace, Robin Williams. He spoke mostly Yiddish, but when he finished, he was happy with his job and turned me to a mirror to present myself to me. Rest in peace, Robin Williams. The funniest man alive was in my dressing room a good half hour and was far funnier than the set I had to go do soon. Rest in peace, Robin Williams. When he left my dressing room, I felt alone as I ever remember feeling. Rest in peace, Robin Williams. Until today, rest in peace, Robin Williams, unacceptable. Rest in peace, Robin Williams. I found myself, probably like you at some point, with a familiar lament under these circumstances when these stories come out and you hear these things. And we think to ourselves, man, how could someone experience that kind of despair? With all that talent, all that money, all that fame. Someone like that. And not necessarily that we're so much better than them. That's not the question, or we would have done things differently. But we just go, how is it? How is it? Because we'll never have that sort of fame and that kind of thing probably, right? So, but it's just a question of why. Like we think the right amount of money, the right amount of fame, the right amount of attention, the right amount of likability, the right amount of something. We can't comprehend how it could ever get to the spot where you would even contemplate taking your own life. And that is exactly what I want to talk about. Not Robin's death necessarily, but our statement about that. Our statement, either audibly or within our minds, begin to say, how could something like that happen? The statement says more about our idols than about his decision that day. So I want to talk about the difference between sorrow and despair for a moment, because I think this was a moment of despair, and in the moment of despair, we make poor decisions in that way. So let's define sorrow and despair. Sorrow is pain for which there are sources of consolation. We all have experienced or will experience sorrow at some point. Sorrow is being sad of certain things. Sorrow comes from losing one good thing among others, whether it's the death of a family member or a friend or loss of a job or the loss of a relationship. It's a good thing, and now it's not there, and life will never be the same as a result of it. And you wish that you could go back and change time, but things happen, people move away, relationships break down, things are said. And things, it's just life. And you say, I'm in a state of sorrow. Now, the nice thing, hopefully for you, is that there are sources of consolation for this. A new job, a new relationship, family and friends who can hear you out, walk you through this. The death of a family pet oftentimes is consoled by the purchase of a new pet 6 months later, right? And you just forget about the other dog. Hopefully not. Just kidding. We just lost a dog a month ago, so that's where we're at. Anyways, that's sorrow, but it's not inconsolable. Despair is inconsolable. Despair comes from losing what we consider to be an ultimate thing. It's this, I don't know what I'm going to do. Everything now. I feel completely imbalanced. And there really doesn't seem to be any sources of consolation for this. I invested everything into this, and now it's gone. Everything into this relationship, everything into this marriage. He was the one, she was the one. I invested everything into this job. You know how hard I worked for this thing? Do they even know what kind of hours I put into this? My whole entire identity is wrapped up in this. I don't know what life feels like or looks like without me, with those letters after my name, or that phone number, or that computer, or that job, or that access, or that. I don't know what that's going to look like. It feels despair in that way, loss of an ultimate thing. Kylie asked me a few weeks ago if I had ever felt despair. Knowing I was talking about this or something, and she goes, "You ever felt despair before?" And I said I didn't think that I had. I mean, I've experienced bouts of sorrow before. We just did my grandfather's funeral last Saturday, and he passed away in March of 2020, but for like all kinds of different reasons, we didn't get around to it. Not because we were like too busy for him, but you can imagine with the COVID thing, we just didn't do the funeral for 16 months. 16 months, and yet you still get in front of people, you start talking about him, and you get choked up, and you're like, man, I wish he was here. I wish, things were different, and I wish all that kind of stuff. That's sorrow, and the nice thing for me is source of consolation. I was surrounded by family and friends and all of that, so we go from there. But so I was like, that's sorrow, but that's inconsolability, despair. Yeah, I don't think that I've experienced that, or don't recall it. Don't remember that personally. And long pause, and we're doing other things, and then she goes, "Okay, so you're going to ask me?" And I was like, "Oh, so that's what this is about." Like, I didn't understand that this is how this thing works. That I didn't get the cue. I missed it. I'm a bad husband. So I said, "Okay, yeah. So have you ever experienced despair?" And she began to recite, and I didn't have a pen and paper to write things down. But from the best of my memory, here's about how it went. Well, when I'm driving the kids to and from practice and London's late for babysitting, Clyde doesn't have any shoes on. The twins are fighting over a dumb toy in the back. They're both screaming at each other and at me at the same time. And some jerk decided to park over the line to the point I could barely squeeze in the parking spot. Grayson forgot his water bottle. You called me to tell me you forgot about a board meeting tonight, and after hearing all of this from me, your first words to me were, "You didn't ding the car door getting out of that tight parking spot, did you?" And she goes, "That kind of felt like a lot of despair in those moments," right? And you're like, yeah, I need to use some better judgment on that, probably. Despair leads to phrases like this: "I don't know how to go on from here." Hopelessness, "I feel lost, everything's crashing around me." Every few years, and I don't know how often the year cycle is, but when the economy goes through like its ups and downs and experiences one more of the downs that keeps going down, it's like a nosedive in those ways. It's not rare to hear stories of people in the investment community who are so tied up in wealth, and all of a sudden everything, nothing seems to make sense. The economy's plunging, and they die by suicide, oftentimes in the third bay of their 5-car garage, and we think to ourselves, how? Over money? Like, what? That's despair. That's that feeling. And why do we put so much weight into so many different things? There was a French philosopher named Alexis de Tocqueville who wrote a series of books, one of them called Democracy in America is what it was called. In about the 1830s, trying to do an evaluation as to why the American Revolution worked, but the subsequent French Revolution didn't. The French saw the Americans kind of break free from all of that stuff, and they, as a people, said, we're going to have a revolution of our own. If you know world history, it didn't end quite in the same way, and they're trying to figure out why. What's the difference? So he investigates Americanism, and what succeeded and why it succeeded. He wrote this. In 1830, he wrote this: "A strange melancholy haunts the inhabitants in the midst of abundance." America was a place of abundance, and there's a haunting, a melancholy that haunts us. Americans believe that prosperity can quench their yearning for happiness, but such hope is illusory because the incomplete joys of this world will never satisfy the human heart. He wrote that in 1830. He could have written that in 2021, right? The illusory of the hope that is involved in the incomplete joys never satisfying the human heart. Idolatry, if you're taking notes, is taking some incomplete joy of the world and building your entire life around it. Idolatry is not bronze statues in your basement not anymore. I mean, that's the problem with, I think, a lot of times us reading through Scripture and being like coming to Exodus chapter 20 or some of the stories of the Old Testament and the idols and us being like, not relevant for us anymore. I would never do that. And yet this idea of taking something that's an incomplete joy of the world and building an entire life around it, a strange worship of sorts. We worship strange things. We do it in strange ways. We may not physically kneel before the statue of Aphrodite like what Paul experiences in the book of Acts, but many young people today are driven into depression and eating disorders by an obsessive concern over their body image and what people see or think of when they see them. We might not actually burn incense to Artemis, but when money and career are raised to cosmic proportions, we perform a kind of child sacrifice, neglecting family and community to achieve a higher place in business and gain more wealth and prestige, all with the hopes that that's what we truly want, and that's when we'll feel fulfilled. In ancient times, the deities were bloodthirsty and hard to appease, and in a way and in a sense, they still very much are. So the big point of today is a kickoff to a series, and if you've been around Eastlake, you know that week one of a series is always just trying to gather interest to get you to come back. The big point would be this, that anything can be an idol. It's usually a good thing that becomes a bad thing when it becomes an ultimate thing, but anything can become an idol. A joy that is misdirected, Augustine would say, a misguided love, a thing that's worth love, but not like ultimate love. We love it to the point that it can't deliver on what we are trying to get out of it, and yet we keep pressuring it to do so. We keep expecting more from it when it was designed to be a hobby, and we've made it into the reason for existence. Exodus chapter 20 is where we kind of immediately think of or go to in our minds when we hear about idol worship. It's the place where Mount Sinai takes place, and it's the tablets coming down with the 10 Commandments on it. I'll read these for you. And God spoke all these words, verse 1 of chapter 20. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Here's the preamble to our relationship. He viewed this oftentimes as a marriage relationship, that there's going to be some expectations that come along with this in a covenantal way. Like, I take care of you, you do things for me in this way. I ask you about despair, you ask me about despair. That sort of connection point in this way. And here would be some of the expectations. You shall have no other gods before me. This is not a competition. I'm not in the mood to compete. I want your allegiance and your full allegiance. I'm not one of many for you. I'm not number one of 10. I am it. This is it. This is all we go for. You shall not make for yourself, verse 4, an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow to them or worship them. Never put into an image format. Never put into this tangible piece of object, something that would be an image of your creator. Not that you would ever think that this cow or this chicken or this bronze statue really is the God. It's representative of it. But to do so would even be to limit the greatness of who I am. So therefore, don't even do anything in this way, which is so foreign and so different from all of the other ancient religions that they'd kind of come out of. Remember, this was a group of people who were pulled from a lot of different things, who were surrounded by cultures where deities were formed in the business of objects, the god of the sun, the god of the rain, the god of the things, and it's in this, and we hold this, and we take these family idols with us when we travel, and we take care of them as a way of saying my honor and respect for these things. It was so foreign to not have anything that when foreigners would come in and invade Jerusalem, and they would go into the temple and they would go in through the walls hoping to extract some of these bronze images or images made in gold and silver, this would be their way of saying, not only are we greater than these gods, but we're going to take this value, we'll melt these down and create them into our own personal gods. They would go into the temple and they would write about it later, how they would come upon empty room after empty room after empty room. They just worshiped nothing. They had these big temples, and inside was nothing. There's no statues anywhere. There's empty boxes or empty rooms. It was like the weirdest thing ever that they would say. We've never understood a people group like this. They took this stuff very seriously. They did not make for themselves any image. They did not take for themselves anything that was tangible or whatever. Anything in life can serve as an idol, a God alternative, a counterfeit God. Many times, a lot of times, as we'll evaluate, hopefully over the next couple of weeks, it's a good thing that become bad things when they become ultimate things. The greater the good, the more likely we are to expect that it can satisfy our deepest needs and our hopes. But anything can serve, especially the very best things in life. So what is an idol? Anything more important to you than God? Anything that disproportionately absorbs your heart, your imagination, your time, your attention, your money? Anything that you seek to give you only what God can give? That should you lose it, your life would hardly feel worth living? Physical beauty is a pleasant thing, but if you deify it, if you make it the most important thing in a person's life or culture, then you have the God of beauty. After that, he's not just beauty itself. You have people in an entire culture spending inordinate amounts of time and money on it and foolishly evaluating character on the base of it. If anything becomes more important than, or more fundamental than God to your happiness, meaning in life and identity, then good chance that thing would be an idol. If we find ourselves on the flip side saying, if I have that, if I can just achieve that, if I can just acquire that, then I will feel like my life has meaning, and then I'll know that I have value and I have significance and security. In fact, the Bible oftentimes uses 3 different sort of physical metaphors to kind of illustrate and help us identify for us what we would say, or what we would come to know as our potential idols. What are those things that we love? What are those things that we place our trust in? And what do we obey? Who do we obey? And what kind of obedience is listening to this? What do we love? What is our time and our attention to? What do we drift off into thinking of? What do we daydream about? What comes to our attention in the moments when there's nothing else going on? What do we trust? What do I fear the most? We make sacrifices to appease and please our gods, who we believe will protect us. What do I fear? I fear job security loss. I fear money. I fear that I might run out of money before I run out of life. I fear not appearing a certain way. I fear losing my marriage relationship because of physical appearance, and so I've got to try and really work hard to kind of keep this thing together. I've got to make sure that my image, my social media following, my platform is big. I got to do this because this is what's most important for me. And if it's taken away, how are you doing? I don't even want to imagine life without X. If you would ever say that and truly believe it, then that's probably a good chance that that's probably an idol. What do we obey? What kind of things places demands on us, and we obey it regardless of it? When our boss says, I'm going to have you do this, and you're gonna do it, and you're like, well, here's the thing, like my family, we've talked about it, and it's not really good for me, but then you have to decide. You have this decision point. You have to go to the family and be like, listen, I can't disappoint here. This is what's expected of me, and we know these things can get out of balance. What do we obey? When they say jump, you say how high, right? What do we trust? What do we love? What do we obey? When we discern, when we are attempting to discern what do our idols look like, those are good questions to be able to ask. And a lot of times, again, it's a lot of times good things that become bad things when they become ultimate things. Perfectionism, workaholism, chronic indecisiveness. I want you to have good jobs. I want you to be somebody who takes value in their work to the point where I'm going to be a semi-perfectionist in this way. The need to control the lives of others. All of these stem from making good things into idols, and then they drive us into the ground as we try to appease them. Idols begin to dominate our life. And hopefully what we get to the point of at some point is we arrive and experience episodes of what we would call disenchantment. When the idol for 1 second loses its spell over us. When we get to see the backside of it. When we experience the indeliverability of its promises in this way. Or we experience like, oh, this isn't exactly what I thought it would be. If you've ever been to Disneyland or Silverwood after hours, you know what disenchantment looks like. Oh, this is just a place. This is the business. I forgot, right? This last week, I went to a Mariners game with some friends. It was a day game on Wednesday. We drove over and back same day. And for 4.5 hours, the lights are on, the sound's going, popcorn's getting thrown around, the Mariners are losing, all the things you would come to expect from a Mariners game. And you're just there, and it's like, man, it was a beautiful day in downtown Seattle. I've lived there for a while. Those are few and far between, so we were truly enjoying this out there, and we looked and we're like, this is amazing. And then the game got over, and predictably we lost, and we sat there and we waited because we're like, you know what? We're going to let everybody else deal with traffic. We're going to sit here and just like hang around for 20 minutes and just, I don't know, there's no place. We had to go all the way home, so it wasn't really like we're not trying to rush out of there right away. And almost immediately, like people were getting to disperse. Nobody's coming around offering us popcorn or candy, or cotton candy anymore. The lights are off. There's no music being played. There's like now almost immediately about 1,000 seagulls within the stadium just doing loops around the building, just dive bombing, getting ready to figure out where they're going. And we realized like the disenchantment of the game wore off within 15 minutes. We were like, right when the game got over, we're like, we could be here forever. This is great. And about 15 minutes in, we're like, we gotta get out of here. These birds are gonna kill us. You know what I mean? Like, and there's nobody here. There's no workers to protect us. There's nothing going on here, and we're gonna starve to death. And I don't know. Disenchantment is quick, and it really changes your focus on a few things, and you begin to go, maybe this isn't as great as I thought it was gonna be. There's a podcast that some of our team has been listening to this recently. It's called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. Mars Hill was a church over in Seattle, Ballard area that got started as a church plant, grew exponentially fast. Mark Driscoll was the lead pastor there, and it grew to 15,000, one of the biggest, fastest growing churches in America. Mark was sought-out speaker, author, wrote tons of stuff. I was living in Seattle, going to school at the time, so I was really close to kind of all that stuff. I went to Mars Hill once, but it was like, that was if you were going to plant a church, this was the model, this was it. And he was a tough authoritative speaker, which was kind of rare for Seattle, but it seemed to work in all of these things. And then all of a sudden, I remember it was at one point it got so big, and then you begin to hear like rumblings about some things happening behind the scenes. And then almost out of nowhere, he left. He was fired, let go, resigned, however you want to look at it. And they decided to shut the church down like a month later. And that was it. It was crazy because it was literally running thousands and thousands of people and then just gone. It would be like if Nike came out today and be like, we're just done. We're not going to make any more shoes. Sorry, thanks for everything. 50 great years. It was awesome. And we're out. And we'd just be like, what? Like, what are you talking about? That's kind of how it felt in the church world in this way. And then this podcast comes out about 10 years, 15 years after the fact now, and talking through some of the turmoil going on with the leadership and Mark specifically, and all kinds of crazy stuff. And in this, and I don't mean to bring it up to disparage Mark or the church in any way. It was close to me because we were over there. But in this week's episode of it, because Christianity Today is releasing it week by week, one of the ladies that was interviewed in this one talks about how hopefully this is sort of an apocalyptic of sorts for the way that we have viewed megachurch sort of stuff. Apocalyptic meaning not meaning like fire and brimstone, everything's ending, burning down, hold the signs, let everybody know. Apocalyptic meaning literally the Greek word term that's involved in that. Revelation is a term that doesn't necessarily mean like this is the revelation of the end times. It was a revealing of the nakedness of what is actually at stake, that Rome really doesn't have any power, that the emperor has no clothes, that this is not what it was built up to be. Everybody is projecting this image. Every once in a while, you get a behind-the-scenes picture of all the stuff that was actually going on in that line of work or when that movie was being made, and we're like, oh man, here's the backstory, here's the real story, right? That's what this podcast has been, and it's like this revelation of sorts, this unveiling, that's the actual technical term for apocalyptic, this unveiling of it, and it provides a moment of disenchantment. Life is not, or this thing is not what it was cracked up to be. And you get a chance to then come back and do things differently as a result of this. So my prayer for us is that we go through a time of disenchantment once we identify these idols, and for the next couple of weeks, maybe perhaps force ourselves into these questions that go, is this really, have I made a good thing into an ultimate thing? What happens if this ever goes away? And if that goes away, where do I stand with this? What kind of image stuff have I wrapped way too into this? What kind of value systems have been like, this is so incredibly important to me that my wife knows it's more important than her, my kids know it's more important than them, my job, whatever. It's like this has become something that if this goes away, my life will be wrecked. I will live in despair or a moment of despair. And there's really only one thing that deserves that category of our life, according to Scripture. So the next couple of weeks, I hope that we experience moments of disenchantment so that we will wake up to the realization that the living God who revealed himself both fully at Mount Sinai and on the cross is the only Lord who, if you find him, can truly fulfill you, and if you fail him, can truly forgive you. Who, if you find him, can fulfill you and deliver on the promises of, is this the life that's worth living? Yes. And then if you fail him, can truly forgive you. And when we do fail him, can truly forgive him. So that's where we're headed for the next couple of weeks. My hope is that you'll be along for the ride, and join us as we discover a little bit more about OMG and a little bit more about the idols that we have made, the good things that become ultimate things and therefore are not great for us. Let's pray. Father, our prayer is that you would help us to begin to discern these types of things, evaluate what is it that we trust, what is it that we love, what is it that we're obsessed with, that we daydream about, we think about, we spend an inordinate amount of time and attention to, that if it was taken away, it would wreck us. And we pray that in this removal of things, that in this period of disenchantment, that perhaps we would then begin to place more weight, more trust, and more love, and more attention on you. Give us the wisdom to what that looks like in our life, the courage to do something about it. In your name, amen. Amen. Hey, a couple of quick announcements, and then I'll let you go. In evaluating for our staff, the logistics of the service times heading into this fall, we're going to make a change to our early service. If you only attend the 10 o'clock, then this does not affect you. But there is a chance that you kind of bounce back and forth between the 9 o'clock and the 10 o'clock based on how your Sunday's looking in Sunday schedule. And so we are realizing that the time frame between ending of the first service and the beginning of the second is just too narrow. We thought we could pull it off, but it's becoming too much of an issue of getting our leaders into the rooms in time for you to be able to drop off your kids, connecting with our team captains and leaders in that way. So we are bumping ahead the time of our first service. It's currently at 9 o'clock. It will be at 8:30 starting September. So the first Sunday of September, it'll go 8:30. We'll go 8:30 and 10 heading into the fall. If you only attend 10, again, it doesn't affect you, but we want to let you know so that you don't show up at 9 and miss like most of the service. So that'll be a big deal in September. And then the second thing is just more of a personal request for you. Our church has operated on a leadership structure that looks similar to kind of a U.S. government sort of thing. We have different branches of things. We have our board, which operates kind of as they set the budget. They're the legislative branch, if there was one of this. They set the tone of here's what's going to be doctrine for us as a church. Here's the major decisions. We have an executive branch, which is our staff, who kind of make sure things play out and follow through on the vision of the church. And then we have what we call external elders, which in this sense would be judicial branch, but it kind of, I don't know. There are two guys that are currently leading churches that are a little bit bigger than us, older than me, operating with a sense of wisdom. They watch over, we send them our numbers, we get advice from them back and forth. I spend 3 or 4 days with them every year, just as a way of saying, you have eyes that are outside of the day-to-day stuff. Help us make sure that we're on the right path in doing these things. Their names are Dave Nelson and Jeremiah Curran. Dave, you heard from last week on video. Jeremiah, you heard from in a couple of weeks on video as well. I got a call last night from Dave texted a group of pastors who are involved with this. Jeremiah is one of them. That Jeremiah's daughter, 17-year-old daughter, Chloe, was in a car accident, and car rolled several times. She had to get airlifted to a hospital, and it's been a really, really bad situation that we're just still, I got a text this morning updating us that there's no bleeding on the brain, but there is some lacerations. And I don't want to get into too many details. It's not on social media or whatever. They just asked us to pray, and I said I would. And I didn't want to be the kind of guy that says, yeah, we'll definitely pray for you, and then we never do. And since he's family, since he's so tied into here, I wanted to make it kind of known to us. If you're the type of person that prays during the week or has some sort of a list or thinks about that kind of stuff, would you consider adding Chloe to that list this week and letting them know that or I'll let them know that we're definitely praying for them and hope for a good report here in a few days. So, and there's other people involved in the accident as well. One of them is even worse than her. So it's a touchy situation. We love Jeremiah and Cherry, his wife. So we wanted to kind of follow up with that. All right, let me read a closing benediction for you. Would you stand? I will read this and then get you on your way. Lord, you are coming in glory to bring the fullness of peace, healing, and justice. Teach us to wait when you would have us wait, and teach us to act when you would have us act. Fill us up with so much expectation for your coming kingdom that we cannot help but enact it now. Amen. May that go with you this week, whatever you're facing. See you back next week for part 2 of OMG. There's snow cones in the lobby for your kids today, root beer vanilla. We'll have